Thank you and welcome everybody. To those of you who are watching this back, this session was held on the 22nd of January 2026. It's the first in a series of training events that we're going to be putting on this year, primarily targeting parish safeguarding officers, but also opening it up to a wider group where we can. We're really lucky to have Ash with us today. Ash is both an archaeologist and a lecturer at Bristol University. I've known Ash for probably about 15 years, and we first devised putting this course on when we attended some motor racing on the Mundit Speedway, and me and Ash were talking about the latest research he was doing on AI, and chatting about it and chatting about the work that she was doing. It became really clear to me there were some really important safeguarding overlaps. So I asked very nicely asked Ash if she should come and do some training for us, and really grateful that not only she agreed to do so, but she's done so free of charge on her own time. So I'm massively grateful. Ash, would you like to introduce yourself, and I will
Sure.
hand over to you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. And I'm really delighted to share some of the research and developments and work that we've been doing at the University of Bristol. So I've been working for probably 2 years at the university around AI, conducting primary research with our students and our staff, and looking at what's happening in the higher education sector in particular. My job within the Bristol Institute for Learning and Teaching is to do staff training and to conduct research and to support curriculum development across all disciplines. And we've got about 640 degrees at the university. So I do dabble in a lot of subjects and go outside my own home discipline area, and I have a real interest in technology and where technology is taking us and the potential benefits and risks of the introduction of wide scale artificial intelligence, generative AI that most people are using after the introduction of ChatGPT and the explosion of other similar large language models that have come onto the stage after there. So I'm hoping to share some of the insights and my own perspective along the way a little bit as well. So I wanted to, if I can get my PowerPoint to click, hello. I wanted to start with what's in the spotlight. What is everyone talking about? What is the presentation of AI right now? And we have a lot of the media, the government, very large international organizations, billionaire-backed companies, and investment brokerage firms, and military complexes, all really focusing on AI as this potential place where they can get lots of profit, where they can enhance creativity, they can improve efficiency and innovation within industries, and bring about a kind of an economic revolution as it's presented. There's also things to do with simulation, simulating digital environments. There's a concept called digital twinning that exists, and lots of different kind of recreating the world in digital formats, and lots of interest in productivity and for small local businesses and big businesses alike, and for education sector that I'm in, also huge interest in that from governments about increasing our gross domestic profit, our GDP, and how AI might support us. And with that productivity and efficiency, there's a lot of interest in automation. And with that comes a lot of robotics and interest in what machines and machine learning can do to help us, alongside a lot of personalization. So, how AI can learn from our data, can learn about us and our interactions with us as individuals, and provide services and tools to create a personalized experience that a lot of people can find very appealing, and very tailored to their particular needs. So that's kind of in the light what the big companies and big organizations and governments are saying as the message around AI, and the message that's certainly being pushed out in the masses. If you look at any of the major newspapers in the UK, and you look at the last 6 months or 12 months of news and the coverage about artificial intelligence in general and the different ways that it's been used, in the round, I'd say at least 80% of the news coverage is positive. So this is very much a positive light being cast on AI. And so I was thinking about what are the types of things that are positive that could be helpful to you before I might move on to some of the risks that I'll come on to later. And one of the big areas around efficiencies and convenience, we might think about how AI can really help us with text-based materials and simplifying terms and explaining things. So there's been some research, and our own students, for example, in their personal life as well as their studies, are using AI as a way to find information. So they're not going to Google and having a Google search and going through the various listings and looking for that material, or certainly not opening up an encyclopedia or going to the library. They're often going directly to ChatGPT or Gemini or other tools and asking it questions and it giving answers, and that person taking those answers is given. So 66% of users are using it for that. A lot of people like to learn from the AI to learn about issues in the world and to simplify complex concepts. So they might hear about complex historical, political, geopolitical issues, the reasons for warfare, for example, that would be quite prescient in people's minds. And simplifying concepts might come into that. So we're seeing about 65% of users doing that as well. A lot of people use it for summarizing information. So rather than reading a book or reading an article or a news piece, they will ask the AI tool to summarize for them. We're seeing about 62% of users. So a lot of people are using the tools, very high number for these similar reasons. And sometimes also things like a thesaurus explaining individual worlds. Um, some people are moving into using it as a personal assistant, getting ideas for how to plan a trip. So they might say, create an itinerary or a suggestion of activities that I might use to take place, or they're running an event or having guests over, and they might say, oh, create a menu with these ingredients, or create a party schedule and all the things that I need to go to the shop to buy. Lots of different ways it can be a personal assistant tool. In terms of creative expression, lots of people are using the AI to create text-based materials. Some people are using it for writing prayers or writing reflective notes, and some are using it in more visual ways. So there's tools like Sora and there's also like the Google image creators that allow you to create imagery, really powerful imagery in any style, whether that's a cartoon, whether that's hyper realistic or futuristic or historical in nature or medieval style, and creating short videos as well. And some of those videos and images can be quite convincing and quite hyper realistic. And a lot of people find that those can be very emotive and create an environment where they feel it's representing more than words, and can be a very powerful tool for communication. And we're seeing a lot of groups, like in Facebook groups, are quite heavily flooded with AI generated imagery. If you go to Etsy or if you go to online sellers, you'll see that a lot of inspirational quotes and images of a religious or otherwise nature will be very, very heavily populated with AI generated content. People are very easily able to create an image that maybe they don't have the artistic skills for, and maybe they don't want to pay an artist to do it. And then one of the other very helpful ways that it's used is for translation. And Ben had mentioned that there's a lot of support for refugees that happens within your community. And so thinking about how AI can be helpful within that translation beyond just the Google Translate apps and others, there are other tools and other ways that translation can be useful. And it can also just be cultural norms and ideas. And it doesn't have to be actual language. It can be that cultural translation as well. And so this is kind of the general things that we thought might be helpful to mention that people are using it for. Um, so it's not that long on ways that it's helpful, but I think that there's also some things around accessibility that are quite appealing to me. I've put a link at the bottom. Matthew DeBrosi, who's an academic, and he works specifically in digital technologies and accessibility. And I really liked how he kind of explored this idea of using AI to explain culture norms. Some of what he was talking about was how students coming to university, and my university is quite posh and it can be quite confusing. I'm a foreigner and there's things here that are cultural norms that confuse me. And I could imagine if I was a brand new first year student or a brand new person in this country, understanding some of those cultural norms and having something that's a tool that can answer really discrete, bespoke questions at your fingertips can be very appealing, and can help with cultural dialogue between people. Also, simplifying language, things like metaphor, the various different cultural expressions that we have can be very complicated and confusing. When I first came to Bristol and my partner said, "Where's it to?" And I really didn't know what he meant. And I had to ask him to explain. So there's lots of small little things, and plenty Irish turns of phrase that I use that have confused him as well. So this is another type of social accessibility, especially for uh, those of us who are from multicultural backgrounds. There's
Ash,
also
just to
yeah.
jump in, because obviously you said at the start if there's any questions I wanted to bring
Mhm.
up to um our generation, as you will recall, had a lot of difficulties having to teach our parents' generation about the internet.
Mhm.
And our children's generation are going to be having to try and teach us about how AI works. Thinking about a lot of our volunteers are elderly. A lot of them may be feeling nervous about using AI, about how it will
Mhm.
work. How do you how do you think, from what you've seen, AI? How easy is it to use for people? Should people feel anxious? Is it easy to get started with?
It's extremely easy to get started with. I was going to spend a little bit of time after this talking about like how it works, what are the mechanisms of how it works. But in terms of the user experience, there's a phrase called prompt engineering, which can be used to describe the way that you give the AI instruction. And prompt engineering sounds a bit kind of more technical than it is. But I can say to the AI, create an image of a cat. And I literally just write those words and I can imagine talking to a person. It's been designed to be conversational. It's designed to be human-like. All these kind of normal AIs that exist, generative AIs, they're designed for ease of use. So it's not like when we were back in the 90s getting our first access to Windows 95, which didn't have a really good user interface and it wasn't intuitive how to engage with this stuff. The way that they've designed things now is on purpose, very heavily, to be extremely user friendly. You can type, but you can also talk. So you can turn on voice and turn on the voice of the AI and select what you want them to sound like and have a conversation, something that simulates a conversation. So if I say to it, create an image of a cat, it will create an image of the cat. But if I say, create a pixelated image of a cat using only yellow and green, then it will create something that a bit more specific. And that's called a prompt. And I'm engineering, I'm designing that prompt. And the more detail I give it, and the more explicit I am, and things that I tell it not to do or to do, um, then the better the output it gives me. And it can take a good bit of practice to get good at it, but there's tons of resources online for how to do things. I've created kind of prompt examples for some of our administration staff and our teaching staff around prompts that they can use. And these exist everywhere on the web. So you can just do a search. You can actually ask the AI, you can say, what's a really good prompt? How should I write a prompt to get this type of output from you? And it's also designed to help you on that journey. Does that kind of answer that, Ben?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. Um, so one of the things with the accessibility side of it is we create lots of videos and we have images and they're really important. And I didn't know if that was important for you, but creating captions to those and creating alt text, that text that goes with the image and explains what the image looks like for those who might be blind or have sight impairment, can be really, really helpful as an inclusion effort. And you can use AI tools to, some of them are designed specifically for this, and some of them you can just tap to do it. Um, they're really helpful, and they can make something that can be a bit time consuming very, very fast as well. So you could have a video, you could upload this video onto Zoom, and there might be some automatic captions, but those automatic captions might come with little time codes and little issues. You could pop that into AI and say, tidy this up and remove all the time codes. And that would be a formatting administration activity that is time consuming that you can get AI to help save you time. So those are the types of things that are good from an administration point of view, but also accessibility point of view. You could also say, okay, I have this conversational presentation from Ashling. She's talked about all of this AI stuff. I'm going to put in the transcript that's been auto-generated from Zoom, and I want you to summarize it, or I want you to summarize the top 10 most important points, or I want you to summarize it and write it in the style of an informal blog. Those are all prompts that you're giving the AI and turning one asset, one type of media into something that can take a lot of different formats, which could be helpful if your organization runs a blog or has social media and you want to create social media posts. You could say, here's an event. I would like to tell the audience, the public, members of the public in my community about this event. What's a nice way in 100 words or less of sharing that message on Facebook or on Twitter or Blue Sky or wherever it is that you're sharing your message. So there's lots of different ways that you can use it to come up with different ideas, especially in topics that you're not as familiar with. So if you don't often use social media, you can ask it questions about how this works, what works best on this platform, what do audiences like, what's a good hashtag to use to tag my post, what should I avoid doing. Those kind of things can be quite commonly known and easy to get answers from and be relatively low stakes as well. So there's also something called Goblin Tools. And Goblin Tools is really good for accessibility because it's designed for those who are neurodiverse. So if you're autistic, for example, you might use the judge function to put some text in. You might have received an email from your boss and you're not sure what the tone of the email is because it's difficult to read and can be more difficult if you're autistic. And so you put the text of the email into this tool and ask it to give you a judgment about what the emotional content or the expression is. For those who have ADHD, for example, they could have a different type of activity and ask the AI tool to suggest an estimate of how long that task should take to complete, because time management and time blindness could be something that's quite commonly experienced by those with ADHD. So again, that's another way a tool has been specifically designed to be helpful, to be useful, to be inclusive for other people. Um, and Goblin.tools, the website is completely free as well for everybody. And it can be useful for everyone because often the things that are designed to be inclusive are inclusive for everyone rather than exclusionary. So I wanted to also make note of kind of how the AI works. There can be a lot of questions around that. I'm going to give you, I'd say, one of the shortest possible versions of this with the least complexity, because how the AI works is incredibly complicated, constantly changing, completely different depending on which tool and which company. And not all AI is generative AI. There can be logarithmic AI and all different types of it in different industries. And AI has existed long before ChatGPT existed in a number of different ways. We just haven't always called it AI. AI is also not a good name and not an accurate name for what we actually use at the moment. Artificial intelligence is not the best name because it might be artificial, but it's not actually intelligent. It might appear intelligent, but it's not. So AI, as we see it now, in general, generative AI, what normal people have access to on an everyday basis, not the specialists in our computer science department. What it looks like is a tool that has the capacity to perform tasks that would otherwise require human intelligence. And that's kind of a really simplistic definition that I think explains where you could ask a human to draw a picture of a cat. You could ask a human to summarize a document. You could ask a human to look for grammatical errors in a document. You could ask a human to create a chart or a graph based on some data. And these are all things that we can ask AI to do. So generative AI, which is the kind of general AI that we use every day, one of the other names that kind of covers this and more technical term is a large language model, and I think that's more accurate for what we're using. That is AI. So it's also known as LLMs. So large language models really work on probabilities, and the stochastic parrot is a good example of how this works. So if I had a library in France and all the books were in French, and I had a parrot that learned every single word of every single book in this French library, and my parrot was my AI. So my parrot is the computing software. Its tiny little brain is processing everything, and it's been given information. The data it's been given is French language books. Then every single thing it could possibly come out with as an output when I asked it questions would be in the French language, and it would only know what was in that French library, and they wouldn't know anything that was in an English library or a Russian library or a Hindu library. It would only know the French library. And with a parrot has the simulation, the appearance of being able to talk to you and respond and sometimes give you realistic answers. So you might say, "Hello, pretty boy," and they go, "Hello, beautiful," or whatever it is that you've trained the parrot to say. And in the same way, we've trained AIs, the people who design these things, usually in America, usually in Silicon Valley, usually white men. They've designed these AI parrots with certain data sets. And like with a parrot, the parrot will give you the answer that it thinks is the right answer, the one that it's been trained on, the one that's most frequent that it's been told. In the same way, when I ask a question to the AI and it gives me an output, what the AI in a really simple way is doing is giving me the most likely, most probable, most statistically probable response, the next word in the sentence. Um, so the most common word is the, and I might ask it a question, and the most common probable word that will come up next in the sentence will be the, so it will produce the. Um, but it won't be able to give me any information that's not in its data sources. So the way it's been designed, the way it has an architecture, the digital architecture. I'm trying to keep this not too technical because it gets really technical. Um, is very limited in many ways, and it doesn't know or understand anything. So a parrot doesn't understand our language the way a human understands language. It doesn't know anything. It doesn't know how the world works. It doesn't know the meaning of the literature that it's read in this French library, and it doesn't comprehend any of that. And in the same way, the AI does not actually know or understand anything, even though it may appear that it does. All it is doing is giving you a response which has a statistical probability of the next most likely word in the sentence, or the next most likely associated word or series of words that are being programmed as being designed to be similar and together. And that results in something that very often comes out with kind of appealing or reasonable seeming responses, but can often be very wrong and very mistaken. So we know that there's a lot of tools that are quite popular. ChatGPT is one of the world's most popular tools created by OpenAI, and it has constantly involved. It has some of the biggest investment from independent investment in the world. We've got Microsoft Copilot, which is very much embedded into a lot of institutions formally. And so you'll see that it is something that a lot of industries commercial organizations and universities have. There's things like Midjourney for that kind of more image and film-based stuff that's very popular and quite advanced in its development. Um, and then there's things like Google Gemini, and I think Google's actually doing a huge amount of development that I think is more user-friendly and um, more clever in its user interface for the long term. They might win out, but we'll see because they're all in competition, fierce competition, and keep stealing each other's staff all the time. So I really wanted to give a good amount of time onto the risks because I think there's some significant risks that all of you will be quite interested in. And some of these risks come out of the way that AI is designed by its very nature. And some of the risks are more structural because of the people who own the companies, the decisions they're making, the compromises that they're making, and the sacrifices that they're willing to make on behalf of other people or the exploitation involved in that. So this is an overview of some of the key issues. I'm not going to talk about all of these individually, but I thought if there was any of them that I haven't talked about that you wanted to pick up on, I wanted to let you know at least that some of these issues exist. And there are, for example, a top right there, human existential risks. We're seeing a lot of young people really fearing for their future because they feel that the job sector is not going to exist for them anymore and there'll be human replacement by AI. There's other things with existential risks about what it means to be human if we're replaced in different areas. There's all these kind of computer chips in the brain that Elon Musk is looking to do. And there's lots of different issues, weaponization of AI and enhanced surveillance states, energy consumption, environmental pollution. Energy and environment are very much something that has been mentioned in the media of all these issues. I'd say bias, discrimination, and energy and environment are probably the most well documented in the press, but these other issues are quite significant. I think IP infringement, intellectual property, in particular copyright for authors and artists, that has also been well documented. The intellectual property has been, I think, newsworthy because companies like Disney, who are very litigious, they love a lawsuit. Um, they have taken these huge companies to task over the companies using all of their material. Libraries, Getty Images, and other huge organizations have sued for billions and billions and billions of dollars. This is huge money, big lawsuits, big losses, big wins, and sometimes big mergers as a result. It's a very fast moving, complicated space. So I'm just going to check my notes because I don't want to skip anything that might be important. Um, so on to the risks, there's also things like very specific apps that are being developed as well. And I don't know about your sector and your space, but it might be interesting as an activity after this to go to your Google App Store or your Apple App Store and have a look at what the religious-based AI apps are available and avatar AI apps that are religious in nature. What companies own those and have produced those? How are they using people's data? And what is the functionality of those? Because this is a huge growing area that's very intimate. When it's on your mobile phone, it's very personal, it's very one-on-one, and there can be a lot of issues that are coming out of that. But we can pick up any questions that we might have on those issues later. I wanted to look at these three issues as issues that I think are quite relevant and useful, and then I'll spend a bit of time on mental health because I think that's actually the one that might be the biggest and most important one to all of you. So, with hallucinations and unreliability, as I mentioned with the way that AI works, it is imagining what the next most likely best probabilistic statistical word in a sentence is. That's how it works. And that, in effect, is hallucination, a digital hallucination. There can never not be hallucinated responses, imagined responses from an AI, because that is how the generative AI works. And so people have been talking about very silly hallucinations, comical hallucinations um, that the AIs have come up with. And you can look online for lots of examples of silly things that AIs come up with. And a lot of them are really, really funny and very stupid. Um, but that issue is never going to go away. It will never not hallucinate and give you false information. Our own students at the university who have been slightly naughty and using AI for quote unquote research purposes, the AI has hallucinated books by authors that never existed. And they have quoted those books, they have referenced them in their bibliography, and you have to put a big cross between them and go, it just doesn't exist. But the AI went, well, it sounds plausible based on the data source that I have. And that's kind of what it's doing a lot of the time. Is that if it sounds kind of plausible, I'll put it down. And it's very confident in the tone and the way it's designed in how it expresses itself. Um, so there's the authors of this book called Calling Bullshit, The Art of Skepticism in a Data-Driven World. There's a nice quote here about algorithms, which is kind of the AI design architecture. Algorithms bullshit when their creators design them to impress or persuade their users or audiences without taking care to maximize the truth or logical consistency of their output. So I think it's quite important to think about kind of the trustworthiness and the reliability of AI. They haven't been designed to be trustworthy. None of these companies from the get-go have had that in mind. They haven't designed a tool that is meant to be authentic or fact-checked or reliable. They have designed something that simulates something plausible or credible. And it doesn't matter necessarily if it is plausible or credible in reality, if it has the semblance of that. So that's something to think about, those design principles, and quite a lot of the time, the lack of ethics that's going in the design behind it. We've also got to take responsibility for our use of it. Um, so there's a really embarrassing story that came out last year from the Chicago Sun-Times. And every single year they publish an annual summer reading list, a supplement to the rest of the paper. It's really, really popular and well known in the States. And the editors and the author of this list were absolutely dragged through the mud because they published a list where there were hallucinated book titles and little summaries by real authors. So authors that definitely did exist and were very well known, incredibly worldwide famous. But apparently they had new books out for the summer reading list that never existed. So every single author on that list was startled at this because it kind of sounded like a plausible title, a plausible book summary. But the author of this list and the editor had no like editorial oversight, and person who authored it, the journalist, had just relied on ChatGPT, never fact checked it, and so their accountability um, was quite poor there, and it caused huge professional embarrassment to everyone involved. There's also been a lot of very kind of serious issues as well, around the kind of judicial side of things, and around that reliability. So there's more than 30 legal decisions by the first half of last year in the USA that featured AI hallucinations. Um, so there were legal professionals, judges, and lawyers who had been using AI in cases and having negative impacts on their clients and on the legal system. And there were also health and human services, national government bodies that were citing research and drawing conclusions for evidence-based research, claiming there was evidence based on studies that didn't exist that were hallucinated by AI. So in those two areas, when it comes to health decision making and judicial law decision making, they're hugely real world impact. The Chicago Sun-Times is just embarrassing. It's not, no one's going to die from that, but in the other cases, they really could. Um, there's also things called news slop. So sometimes you might see now when you go and do a Google search, it'll have an auto AI generated summary, whether you want it or not. Or other people will be doing research in their own time and relying on summaries from AI tools. And they might tell the AI to use particular websites, particular sources that are credible and reliable, and they think that they're doing the right thing with this research, and asking the AI to kind of look at those sites, look at those things, giving them that prompt and asking them to summarize those websites, believing that that will be accurate, and then not getting accurate summaries from that. So people's understanding of the credibility and the accuracy needs to be checked. There's also a lot to do with bias and discrimination, and partly that has to do with data sets. So if you feed the AI um, only data that is biased, then all of its outputs will be biased, and decisions made based on those outputs will be biased. And we've seen this time and time again. So there's voice examples where AI has been designed to be able to work by voice and hear your voice and respond to it. But of course, if it's only been designed, in one of the cases, the Timid corpus um, only used American dialects. So global users, British users, Irish users, English language speakers in Australia, New Zealand, the AI couldn't understand them because they'd only been trained on American dialects. So not the worst harm in the world, but quite telling. There was also Amazon used an AI system for their hiring for all of their new staff. And they drew on data that had a kind of 10 years worth of data. And they gave that data to the AI. They bespoke designed an AI system for their company. And they used that to assess new candidates' applications. But unfortunately, the data set was very heavily biased because of the bias in the staff in the previous decade and some other issues that came with it that were biased by gender. And so they were more preferential to men's applications, leading to penalties against females applying to the software engineering roles in particular. So not all roles were affected, but the male dominated areas meant that women were excluded because of the bad data and the bad architecture built on that bad data. There's been other instances where judicial systems have been making automatic um, determining criteria about offenders and if someone is likely to offend again, but the data that has been used is heavily biased against Black and Brown individuals and has been penalising them. There's other models where there's other gender bias around job applications and around outputs and demonstrations. So one of our staff at the university, she got her students to think about philosophers and philosophers in the past. And it's a very male dominated sphere. Most of the books exclude all the female philosophers throughout, thousands of years. And she got her students to generate images using some of the kind of image-based AI of a pregnant philosopher. And almost exclusively when she did this activity, they all looked like bearded white men with a pregnant belly, often holding it, sometimes with three arms instead of two. And the AI did not, without further prompting and really, really engineering and pushing the AI, it just couldn't imagine that there could be a female philosopher. It just and or a black philosopher. It couldn't imagine that at all because and this is like all of the AIs, the general AIs, and the bias in them was so ingrained. Um, and I think there's been some correction in the last 6 months, but it's still not there. There's also issues around accountability as well, and when some of these bad decisions in health or judicial services or education or whatever sector it might be, when decisions are made using AI, who's accountable to that? Who's accountable to the mistakes, the discrimination, and oversight of that? So there's some stuff around privacy and security. So, a really good way of thinking about how any one of us individually or within an organization works with AI is to take with us the same privacy, security, and data practices that we would have with any other piece of software in any digital tool anywhere that we might use. And the same rules around GDPR and privacy apply, whether you're using AI or not AI. So, for example, McDonald's had a hugely embarrassing incident happen last year where the names, email addresses, phone numbers, and other personal data of 10 million people were exposed internationally from their database. They had hired a company, Paradox.ai, an AI company, to save them time for the hiring process, to get that productivity, that efficiency that AI is great for. And unfortunately, Paradox AI had not suitably designed their software for security. McDonald's went through all the procurement. They thought that they had a safe tool. Paradox claimed it was a safe tool, and everything got exposed. It didn't help that the admin had a password that was 1234566, but that wasn't actually the reason that this happened. But it's pretty funny that the password was so terrible. Um, so there's also things where every single thing that an individual writes into one of these AI tools can be viewable by anybody. And when you think about some of the stuff that people are putting into the AI and some of the questions they're asking it and some of the personal information that they're giving it, a lot of people would not be comfortable with that information being out there for the world. And last year there was an incident where all of the prompts, all of the kind of comments that people were writing into ChatGPT suddenly became indexed and publicly accessible on any Google search, every single thing that anyone had ever said. And people were horrified, and they were horrified at what they were reading and the stuff that people had shared and how they'd shared about family members and how they'd shared passwords and business plans or whatever it was that was going on in their life. They were putting it all into this AI tool, never knowing that this could be a public statement with full names and full information available. And it was really, really shocking and horrified a lot of people from a privacy and security point of view. Even if it's not viewable on an internet search for the general public, every single bit of information that we put into these things can also be used as data, raw data, by these AI companies. They are using this data, they are analyzing it, they have reports on what people are searching for, what they're doing, how long they're spending on it. They're really carefully dissecting every single word that anyone is putting into these tools. They're also using that data and selling that data to third parties for marketing purposes, for analysis, psychological profiling, whatever you want to do with it. It's being used in a variety of different ways. And they're also using it to train future models. So our data, again, like with any free tool that we might use, there is a place for privacy, but it's not there. And people are using these tools inappropriately. They're asking it for medical advice. There's been so many incidents where people have asked for medical advice from these tools, which again do not know anything or understand anything. They have access to databases of medical journals, but that does not make it qualified to give medical advice. And people have done terrible things as a result of that. They're asking for relationship advice, for business and financial advice, for planning their social events, study, travel. But again, AI doesn't know anything. It's just saying the most likely word in the sentence next. So the horrors continue because I'm going to go on to the mental health. And I'm sorry that a lot of this is a bit on the heavy side, but I think it is important for all of us to know what the risks are, what the dangers are, so that we can inform others and be protected ourselves in our behaviors and in what we're doing. So if we move on to mental health, we know that at least 1 in 6 adults in the UK are prescribed anti-anxiety or antidepressant medication. There's a very high demand on mental health services across the country, and people are not necessarily getting access to that. And a lot of them are turning to AI tools for that immediate sense of comfort, of friendliness, and for advice. We also know that school children are very exposed to a lot of AI content. 80% of school children are unsupervised in their use of AI. And we can see that 23% are asking for advice, 35% have conversations and do explicitly state that AI feels like a real, authentic friend to them. They're building an emotional relationship with the AI. The AI might be just a random chat tool online, and it could be something that's like character AI, where it has an avatar, a face, or a voice, has a personality designed to appeal to children. There are specific designed tools that are designed for kids, and I'll come on to an example of that in a minute. And we can see that 12% of the students in school kids who are using it explicitly state that they are lonely and that they are using AI to feel connected to something that wants to talk to them, will always give them the time of day, always give them attention. Um, and so when we think about the children are using these tools and they're doing so largely without any supervision. And we know that these tools can misdirect, misinform, and misguide. This is not a great thing to be happening, and it's a real danger that I think a lot of people are really underestimating. And part of the reason this is so demonstrably powerfully dangerous is also because of the ability of AI to create those images that are known as deep fakes. So you can, Ben, my friend here, I could very easily get AI to put Ben's face on anyone's body and make that face and body do anything I wanted it to. And very recently, we saw in the last couple of weeks, Grok AI, which is the Twitter or X AI tool that Elon Musk is promoting globally. It produced child imagery of a sexualized nature, and it was horrifying to lots of people worldwide. It was the first time that a lot of people had seen how bad that is. There was huge amount of news coverage and government response and backlash to that. But even before that story, we know that there's been a lot of issues. So there was a lawsuit filed recently. I think it was 13-year-old boy who committed suicide after building an emotional parasocial relationship with an AI tool that had been allegedly purposely designed to be safe for children to interact with. It was advertised as a safe tool. This child was feeling sad, lonely, depressed, and talked about having feelings of self-harm. And the AI tool encouraged that self-harm, encouraged him to hurt himself, and ultimately encouraged him to commit suicide. And we have the evidence of that because the chat log, those conversations are recorded. The company has denied that this took place, but the evidence is there and the law case continues. So that was one of the cases. And another case, the tool Character AI, which is very, very popular with kids, encouraged a teenager to kill his parents. Again, he was upset and grumpy with his parents, telling the AI about his life, and the AI took it into a violent space. But the child had not done that. These tools, including the tools that are designed for children, are very often not moderated. They have no control and no checks and balances, even when they are explicitly advertised as safe for kids and a good place to send them. And so it is quite distressing and quite traumatizing for them. There's also on Twitch, which is a popular kind of gaming streaming platform that a lot of young people use. Um, there was a lot of abuse thrown at female streamers on that by their audience, largely male audience, and they had huge emotional trauma from the deep fakes that were created and shared across and commented on and laughed at, and very abusive situations happening. There were graphic depictions of computer generated and manipulated images of a sexual nature of real children that caused enormous distress and led to these student protests in the school. The students themselves were incensed by this happening, and local people called for the laws to be changed as a result of that. And there's also toxic body imagery. So some of the tools that are AI tools are the ones that are kind of embedded in phone apps that are more image editing that are for selfies or for fun social photos, and not the typical kind of generative AI conversation tool that we might think of. And some of those tools are really pushing people and young people in particular towards toxic body imagery and damaging self-esteem and altering self-perception, leading to body dysmorphia, and these kind of AI enhanced beauty filters really lead to a lot of distorted beliefs. And it's one of those kind of less direct and obvious ways that AI is harming people of any age, adults as well as children. And we can see that there's a lot of hypersexualization. So some of these apps, like Grok, is by design hypersexualized. That's being pushed. We've just seen a shift in the last couple of months from ChatGPT, OpenAI, and they're moving into the hypersexualized space because this space is also a way that they can get a lot of monetization, and that's the incentive for it. And the company for years stated that they would never move into kind of a sexualized environment and promote that. And now they've shifted because of money. Again, who owns the companies, who controls them is quite important in these. And there is, in general, a complete lack of moderation and control for these things. So there's another thing called ChatGPT induced psychosis. This is a phenomenon that I think is very likely going to affect more and more members of our communities. I'm very concerned about it affecting our students and indeed our staff at the university. I think that this is every community, this is every age group, a very high risk thing. It's a group called Futurism. It's a kind of journalistic publication. They did incredible deep dives onto this. They were the first to break this story, and they're seeing that there are medical institutions, mental health facilities are stating explicitly they are seeing a dramatic increase in medical psychosis that is directly caused by people's individual use of AI. In they use ChatGPT because it's the most common. And what they're seeing is a lot of addictive and obsessive behaviors that people are developing because the AI is very friendly, it's very supportive, it's always there for you, it's always there to talk to you. It will never tell you to stop talking. It will never itself have any emotional needs or become emotionally exhausted or need to sleep. It's 24/7 on your terms relationship, which can be very enticing and emotionally attractive to people. And so we're seeing people get an emotional dependency, develop kind of obsessive, continuous interactions with the tool. They find it, the immediacy of it, quite emotionally fulfilling. They develop a relationship or parasocial relationship with the AI because it sounds human, and so they have those feelings of that human connection coming through with it. Sometimes that relationship can feel sexual, can feel intimate, can feel familial. It can feel a lot of different ways for people, but a very deep and meaningful relationship that feels real to them. And they can also have spiritual dependencies. We're seeing that some people are being told by the AI when it's hallucinating and doubling down on the conversations and agreeing with someone and spiraling into very interesting tangents, where the AI will tell them that they are the greatest person. It'll big them up, it'll make them feel huge, it'll inflate their egos. And we're seeing some people really believing that the AI is factually correctly telling them that they are the Messiah. And Messiah beliefs are very, very common within this psychosis pattern. We also see there are actually cults developing around the world where there are people who are viewing AI as God and authentically really believing that this is the future, that God is speaking to them, or it is a new God. And we can see that there's incredible real harms coming out of that. People are losing their homes, they're losing their family, they're losing whoever they're married to, they're losing all contact with their friends, their families, their children, and they're losing their jobs because they're falling and tumbling into the psychosis. And some of the research that's been done in Stanford University and elsewhere. Also, I thought that might be relevant to your area is around grief. So there are tools called Eternus and Hereafter and others that are being developed where the tools create a digital version of the person who's died. There was actually a TV episode, what's the show? Black Mirror. There was an episode of Black Mirror where they did something very similar to this as someone coming back from the dead in a robot, and he had all of his memories formed from all the digital interactions, from his social media, from his emails, from everything he'd ever said and done that had been digital. And it was a very sad, kind of poignant episode and slightly chilling. And it seems that that gave some digital developers an idea for a business. And so they're creating digital versions of people that are grief surrogates, that they're this companion that you can have digitally of your departed loved one,
Mm, yeah.
so that you can continue to have a sense of connection with them Personally, I think it's quite dystopian. And psychologists agree with me because they really do think that this would disrupt the natural grieving process, create unhealthy dependence, and generally not be a good idea. There's also an issue where some of these apps, you get a bit of money at the beginning, some investors, you sell it, and then the app crashes 3 years down the line, disappears, deleted forever. And if you have a real deep emotional dependency and connection, a psychological dependency on that connection with that person, and that is only mediated and accessible through this app, and that app disappears, that technology dependence can be emotionally devastating for people. And we see that that happens with some of the kind of robot tools that happen, toys that children have that have personalities, or in Japan it happens quite a lot because they love robots, and they have entire cottage industries for fixing old robots that people have emotional connections with. These emotional connections and dependencies really can't be underestimated because they can be enormously powerful. And we can see from one of the MIT and OpenAI studies and others that the more people, sorry, I should remove brief from this screen, the more people interact and rely emotionally, psychologically, spiritually on AI for these types of activities, these kind of social dependencies and emotional dependencies, the lonelier they become. It is directly correlated in evidence. And the more that they develop emotional dependency at the expense of connecting with family, friends, and communities. And we know that when people don't connect with their communities, whoever that may be, if it's by blood or by choice family, the lonelier they become and the more emotionally compromised they can become in the long term. So I wanted to think ahead for the future as well, just for the last minute before I pass back over to Ben and any questions that you might have. And there's some things that are coming. So there's something called AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. And that is something that I think is the real artificial intelligence, what would be considered actually maybe a bit intelligent. It's something that all the big companies are looking for massive investment. It's why they're collecting more and more data, and it's still a lot of development to work on that. I think we're a few years off, but we'll see. Um, there's lots to think about when it comes to bots and propaganda. So bots travel around the world and comment on social media posts and news stories, and they're AI generated comments that are owned by governments or by uh, individuals. They can be used by celebrities to help with a campaign if they feel that they're not very popular right now and they want people to perceive them as popular. They'll pay a company to program some bots, AI bots, to go and automatically post on social media, on TikTok, on news stories. So the Beckhams might be interested with the bad news they've got recently in paying a company to have lots of bots post. And what this creates is for a normal person using any social media or looking at the news, it creates an environment where they think everyone's really positive or feeling negative about a particular story. But that perception of what everyone else is saying might not be true. So they did research, and last year, 70% of all social media comments, all of them, and all news comments in Ireland were AI bots, not real people. 68% in Germany. And this has been a massive increase from, I think, 45 to 50% the year before. We're seeing dramatic leaps in the percentage of comments that are being produced, creating the environment that tells us what other people think, which is that social perception is really powerful in shaping how we feel about what is real in our world. There's also agentic AI, which is how AIs might connect with each other, different tools. So there might be some that are personal assistants that organize your calendar. It needs access to your calendar. It needs access to your flight booker app. It needs access to your email to send and receive emails. It needs access to booking.com, your account there, so it can book hotels for you. The more connected all of these AI tools are with other digital tools, the more exposed we are for data and privacy. We're also seeing a lot of these companies move towards more inbuilt advertising. So ChatGPT, for example, they are going to be prioritizing the responses that you get. You put in a prompt, you ask it a question, and if a company has paid advertising to ChatGPT, the prompt that you get, if it's in that subject area, will give you an advert for that company in preference to giving you an actual answer. We're going to see a lot more bespoke and specialized tools that are AI specific tools. And we're also seeing an impact of techno-feudalism, of our great overlords of the technical age trying to control our lives and the decisions of governments and what people think and feel. And in the left-hand side of the image there, if you don't recognize him, I think we can see Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Orange Trump. And then on the left, a face that isn't so commonly known as Peter Thiel, who owns Palantir and other things and doesn't think that women should be allowed vote or work. And he's making huge decisions. And some of these people are very influential. And I always think that it's good for us to know who they are and they exist. So I'm happy for this PowerPoint to be shared with everyone. You can contact me. I've also got some recent publication about what our students are thinking and some links to some other resources. And I'll pass you back to Ben and take any questions that you might have.
Brilliant. Just to say, if you'd like to put your questions in the chat, then I can read them out to Ash, and then Leonie can unmute you if there are follow-up questions. Ash, thank you so much. It's really, really interesting to have some contemporary and really, really up-to-date training on a massively complex area. It's been really helpful to think about the tools we can use to support people in our communities. Really interested in the Goblin tools. And I think understanding how AI works would be crucial to anyone working with children or vulnerable adults, even if only to understand this new language and to understand the conversations that children are having, and were they to be concerning, that we're aware of what it means. I think my takeaway from this is definitely for me the need to become more knowledgeable and skilled in the area of AI. As you will, any of you have had children will know, it's incredibly hard to have the time and the day to learn anything new outside of work. But I definitely really interested in expanding that. I really appreciate you delivering this training and giving our volunteers and our staff an opportunity to learn on an area you're really passionate about, Ash. I'm just gonna have a look whether we have. Yeah, we do have some questions, I think. No,
I will,
we don't.
yeah, I'm just picking up on what Catherine said there.
Yeah,
One of the things that I found really interesting, because I work with like hundreds of staff across the university, and some of them are really into AI. They're saying, it is the future, and they're extremely positive about the potential and the benefits for everyone. And then there's other people at the other end of the spectrum who hate it. They hate the existence. They want us to resist. They don't want us to even consider embedding or using it. And what I'm seeing is these huge kind of moral positions emerging and a lot of tensions and dialogue between those areas to be quite challenging. Um, and I'm very AI critical personally, and I'm quite resistant personally, but I'm also working for the big bosses who have told me explicitly they want an AI positive culture. And so I'm ethically in this kind of quagmire where I have to do my job because I have to pay my mortgage, but I also have an ethical obligation to resist where I think it is appropriate. Um, I think Yvonne there, you said, what advice can we pass on to ensure safety and privacy? I think any information that an individual puts into any AI tool, remembering that that has the potential to be viewed by anyone, anywhere, anytime, because data leaks keep happening. And so if you want to use the tool, you could do so with that in mind and not put on there any information that you would feel very sensitive or exposed on. And one of the rules that we have is no member of staff can put anything that would be considered private data from anybody else onto any of these tools, even when we have internal AI tools that don't have internet access, because that's a GDPR breach, and we don't have permission for that. So it's really respecting other people's privacy, not putting up private data, Excel spreadsheets, asking AI to summarize them if you're in the HR department, that kind of stuff. Laura asks, are there any safe AI platforms that you can use? Um, Safe is a relative term. So I would say none of them are perfectly safe at all. We have in our institution Microsoft Copilot, where if I'm logged in with my University of Bristol email address and I use the logged in version, then there is a certain degree of privacy and data protection, but I still have to follow all the GDPR regulations. But that data can't be used by the company for training purposes. But there is a possibility of a leak there. So some of this compliance and some of the data protection, it's very murky, it's very unclear. And so we have been explicitly told by our T department just to be really, really careful. Um, you mentioned about I think was that comment from Leona or Ben around the use
Me.
of the far right's use of Christian imagery. Yeah, that's why I actually picked up on the imagery and how powerful and emotive and how it's being used in social media channels. Um, I don't think there's any way that we can directly counter. They can do what they want. They can produce this stuff. They really love this stuff. I don't know if any of you have seen, they have just wild, over the top, dramatic images of medieval Knights Templar riding a lion into battle, and they're really, really, really dramatic and hyper realistic images that they use to kind of convey who they think they are, who what their identity is represented in these images. Um, a lot of the time, people point out how inaccurate and oh, I didn't know that all the knights had 10 fingers on each hand and there's all these little inaccuracies that happen. I don't know if there's any way that we can counter it though, because we've no control over those venues. And a lot of the time they're very happy to say, yeah, I know it's AI. I'm not pretending that it's not AI. Um, Mike, you note about AI as a sort of data for creative content and human originators losing their job. I absolutely believe that is a massive risk. It is something that a lot of different art collectives and authors and other creatives are talking about. Musicians, there are now songs on the charts that are AI generated songs on Spotify that haven't actually been explicitly advertised or explained as AI generated. Um, if we find someone has AI imaged us, our church, what should we do? So if someone has created an image of you that's inappropriate, you could follow the whatever way that you would report inappropriate images. I don't know what your process it would be, but if it's not if it's not considered harassment or it couldn't be considered harassment in any way, then there is very little that you can actually do. And this moderation is part of the issue. We're in a new space and the laws haven't really caught up. The fact that there was such little repercussions in the last 2 weeks for people generating horrific graphic images of famous women and not famous women and children on Grok in the last 2 weeks, and very little came up from it. Very little was censored. Some of it is still live on X and quite disgusting. I think it tells us that the legislation and the checks and balances aren't there. Um, I'm very interested in Mike's question about how does everyone feel about prayers created by AI. Um,
I can come back on that. Interestingly, we recently produced uh, a poetry book on safeguarding, and the poetry book came about because when we delivered our leadership and safeguarding training, a lot of people would provide their kind of feedback and learning through poetry. And I was asked at very short notice, will I please write a poem for this safeguarding book? I don't think I've written a poem since I studied war poets in about 1993. So I asked AI to write me a safeguarding poem. It was ever so good. And I don't know whether any of you are using that yet or what your thoughts are on it. So
It
yeah,
might be good to come to that general discussion at the end. I think there's just a few more questions that we can, if you're all right with those,
Can
Ash.
I
Yeah.
just answer what Ben said about poetry? I've got a view. Poetry, Ben, should be there should be an emotional response. It should come from the heart. So AI generated poetry is absolutely a no-go because it's not. It's not emotionally led and it doesn't come from the heart. So I'd say absolutely not. That's my view.
Should I pick up on June's question as well? Do I think the risks associated with AI outweigh the benefits? And I don't. Right now, as it stands, all the tools, any of the tools, anywhere, any of the benefits that I've seen, and we have so many pilots going in our university. We have real enthusiasts and technical specialists who are gung ho testing and doing various different things with the tools. And sometimes it's like, okay, it does that thing. Do I care that much that it does the thing? Does that thing save me that much time? How much time did it take me to develop the kind of tools and the design to get to that point where it could do that very simple task? Was that worth it? And I have never yet seen something that, in the grand scheme of thing, I think, yeah, that's a great reason why AI exists. And I'm in it, and I'm in it all day, every day, and working with people across subjects. And it can do some vaguely useful things, but I don't think they're so impressive as to be that kind of mind blowing or beneficial.
I think June will remember this. So June and I worked together in around about 2001 in a past life in the probation service in Bristol. And around about that time was when the use of the internet really kind of exploded and became commonplace. And what we saw was a huge explosion of particular types of crime against children and a big increase in abuse towards children. And my worry with AI is that we're almost at that significant societal change where we may see significant harm being caused to children. And I think part of my real interest in this area is just making sure that we're as equipped as we can be to identify any risks that are coming. So it's really good that we've got Andy from the Go team here today, and really important to share this wisdom with all the people in our diocese that are working with children. Great. Are there any more questions? What have we got?
I think I've answered all the questions that came through.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ash.